This morning we are honored to have Craig Refuse as our musician. If you'll look into the supplement to the song book, it's the little binder that we have, and all the songs are in alphabetical order. So we are going to sing Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child. We acknowledge that racist ideology drove those African Americans from the area, and we honor them and the powerful history of this place. We also acknowledge that in the 1800s, the Muskogee Creek people were driven from this land, and we support justice for all Indigenous people. My opening words are, it feels like everything that has gone missing in my life, joy and love and laughter and companionship, all flooding back to me at once. This is home. This is what I've been searching for. Do we have anyone here who's here for the first time or has been gone for a while and would like to stand up and introduce yourself? Yes.
My name's Simonton. I'm Stell Simonton's daughter.
Yay!
And my partner Miles is here with me today.
Yes, and you kind of grew up in the congregation, didn't you?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah. Okay, anyone else? Yes, in the back.
Hi, I don't usually count. I'm Steve McGuire's daughter from Oceana. I haven't been here since it opened back up, and I don't really attend the online meeting, so.
Yay!
Yes, welcome OC. And welcome to Bear also. Two other people that grew up in the congregation. All right, anyone else? Okay, we like to celebrate birthdays and anniversaries. And does anyone have a birthday they'd like to celebrate? Craig? My birthday. You want to start us out with the song?
Oh, I'm sorry. That would be right.
I was not asking you if it was your birthday. So my birthday was last Wednesday, and I'm 68 years old.
And I noticed your birthday was on the 4th. It's the same as Bill Fleming's birthday.
Oh, yeah.
And I always send him a May the 4th be with you.
Yes.
A few times. So we're going to do, in the old songbook, page 25, Turn Around by Melvina.
Now this is her birthday song. Happy birthday.
Okay, that's all you need.
Didn't realize my duty here. Probably TFC is good. Is that good? Yes.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Liz. Happy birthday to you.
And now we're going to hear Turn Around, page 25 in the old book.
So,
We are also mothers. And it's going to be Stell Simonton, Cindy Lou Who, and Kathy McGuire. Cindy asked me to read this quote before they got started. This is from Cahill Gibran. Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing itself. They came through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. So first, Stell is going to come up, and she will introduce herself, and then she will pass the torch to the next speaker.
First of all, I want to make sure that this is loud enough. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm a longtime member of the congregation, and I am an older mother in that my children are already grown. And I think Cindy and Kathy will talk about a different stage of motherhood. But what I first want to say is that in some way, this Mother's Day of 2022 feels like a historic one to me. We're seeing efforts to roll back and take away some rights that women have had for 50 years around ending pregnancy. And as we all know, the effect of restricting abortion ends up forcing them to become mothers. And this is not a way to celebrate motherhood. So, enough said on that subject, but at this moment, I want to invoke the goddess Kali. She's the Hindu goddess of motherly love, time, and death. I was introduced to this deity back in India in 2014 when I was there. I was in Calcutta, and one of the major sites there is the Temple of Kali. So I stood in a long line of people outside this temple, mostly worshipers and tourists as well, waiting to put flowers and money at the foot of a statue that was in the center of this temple. And after a long time, I got inside, but I found the statue hard to see because it was raised up and there were bars around it. And also, it was just bizarre. I didn't know what to make of it. She was so strange looking that I couldn't grasp what people were worshiping. I thought, what kind of a mother is this? But a lot of representations of this goddess have her holding a severed head in one hand and a sword in another, but she's got 4 hands, so the other 2 are out in some sort of benediction or blessing. So she is both a warrior and a very loving mother. So what I want to say is that our image of mother, in my own personal view, needs to encompass fierce mama as well as gentle and loving mother. For a number of reasons, including the need right now to protect women's bodily autonomy. But there are other reasons. One of my earliest memories as a very young child was waking up in the night, having a nightmare, waking up crying, and it was cold also, and frightened. And so Mama came in and comforted me, and I remember really wanting to get in bed with her. And I also remember she didn't really want me to, but she did let me. And I have this memory of lying in bed next to her as she was so big and warm, and I felt so safe after having been so frightened. And it was just a memory of bliss, actually. And somehow I feel like this is related to the human sense that we all have of longing and yearning, So another childhood incident is one that I don't remember, but that my mother has told me. I was about 6 or 7, and I was in my little playroom where I had a blackboard, and for some reason I had gotten mad at Mama. So I wrote on the blackboard, "I hate you, Mama." A little bit later, apparently I repented and had a change of heart. And so when she came back in, she saw that I had crossed out the word hate with a big X and written the word love. So what this says to me is that motherhood also requires being the container for all these projections. In other words, you're socializing young human beings, and you're containing and directing all of the wild and contradictory feelings. So mothers are faced with the wild and the untamed, whether it's young children older children or even adult children in some cases. And to be frank, when you're faced with that, it calls forth the wild and untamed in you. So that's the challenge also in motherhood, and an important challenge to meet. So I grew up in the era of the second wave of feminism in the 1960s and 70s, and I was strongly influenced by it. I rebelled against what I saw as a lot of constraints that women faced, and I saw a lot of contradictions. But at the same time, I was growing up with that kind of trajectory. My mother was in the midst of caretaking because she spent years taking care of my older sister, who was a year older than me, who was profoundly disabled, intellectually disabled, and needed constant care. And so when I had my first child in 1988, I was still not, still hadn't figured out this balance between caretaking and the need for my own independence. And I hadn't really established myself in a career at that time, so it was a conflicted time for me. And I also saw the caretaking role as a little bit threatening because I was afraid of getting subsumed in it because I had seen my mother, how she had, through my eyes, given up things. But that's just one point of view. So when I was a young mother, I was simultaneously a member of the Leche League, which is an organization of breastfeeding mothers, and I was an officer in the National Organization for Women, the local chapter. And all this seemed perfectly natural to me, but these organizations had different outlooks, and I didn't fully grasp the competing forces that I was in the middle of. But sometimes when I thought about motherhood, particularly when my children were young, I felt like there wasn't quite room enough to breathe. That the idea of how you have to be as a mother is too narrow. And I think often that's because we're looking from strictly the perspective of a child, which we all have because we were all children. But some of us also didn't become mothers, and I think something like 80% of women actually end up having children. And there's one other thing, this is my own personal opinion, and you may not agree, but I think we're something of an adolescent culture. I think in some ways we're all still looking to mama to make us happy and holding us responsible for that in some ways. That we have to step beyond that. And one last thing, it's my perception that when I think of as therapeutic culture has contributed to some of the difficulties, I would say, of motherhood. Because when people go to therapy to begin to explore their problems, they're often encouraged to look back into their childhood and their relationship with their parents. And inevitably, the question becomes, somehow it always seems to devolve down to, what did they do wrong, those parents? So, and with this approach, human suffering seems to be laid at the foot of parents. I don't think good therapy really ends up saying that, but I think that's what's leaked out into the culture. And I don't think that's been good for mothers. So, for all those reasons, I see the image of Kali as kind of a corrective, a widening of view. And when we have a full view, when we see mothers in their full humanity, as diverse and varied as people are, I think we're all in better shape. And we can honor our particular mother and have reverence for sort of the larger mother, personified in so many ways, but who represents that fierce nurture, that life-giving force that's in the world and that also is within us. Thank you.
Don't want to have a coughing fit with all the pollen.
Is this your cup of water?
No.
grateful that I lived in a time where I had the privilege to make it a choice. And I lived a full life before I had kids. I had an early marriage, and we were too young and not ready to have kids. And I had a long-term relationship with someone who had 2 kids already and did not want to have more, and thereby, as he thought, take away from the kids he had. I was 39 when I had Oceana and 40 when I had Hubert, and I knew it would change my life forever in so many ways. But I was running out of childbearing years, and I knew it, and I didn't want to be a single mother, and I married their father, and that turned out to not be such a great choice, but it was a choice I made. But what I decided was the important thing for today to remember is that I was an existentialist before I became a mother. And as I was lucky enough to know our founder, Lanier, and be inspired by some of his tenets, I thought I'd share them with you today. The number one I live with every day is disturbances take precedence. It seems like such an easy thing, but Lanier did not have children of his own, but I hear his voice at 11 o'clock at night when I hear a loud noise or yelling, and I know that it's my job to get up and investigate. Another idea I learned from Lanier is living within the paradoxes of life. In many ways, I live within this, but the most, knowing that your child is the most wonderful human being in the world, and also knowing that they can be terrible monsters. And at the same exact time, and yes, I'm looking at you. Lanier always said, look at your checkbook to verify your values. I don't use a checkbook very often these days. Everything's online, everything's just numbers floating in the ether. But I know that a lot of my money goes towards food. 2 growing teens eat a lot at all times of day. And their schools cost a lot, and uniforms and clothes, and there's always field trips and such. And new shoes. I feel like I'm buying shoes all the time. Authenticity is a big tenet of Lanier's. And we've had trauma, we've had mental health challenges, and it's difficult. Life is hard, and just 2 teenagers, life is hard, but we move through them, we acknowledge them, we talk about them, and I let my kids call me out. They call me out all the time. Living in the moment is not particularly Lanier's, but I know he believed in it. When you have children, it's even more crucial. They're constantly morphing into someone completely new and different. I know when you guys came in here today and saw my children, you're like, who are these people? Well, I live with them every day, and it's still a shock. Who are these people? Just when you think you have a handle on a developmental stage of childhood, they've moved on. And I don't know if that's because I was an older mother, and maybe my time goes by so quickly, and theirs is a different scale. I don't know if you have kids when you're in your 20s, you are in it more with them, but for me it's like, who are these people? Another Lanierism was to sing out loud. And for me, this is usually in the car, and even with no one else around, I still manage to embarrass my children. Please, Mommy, don't sing. I practice daily, I fail daily, I sleep try again.
Happy Mother's Day. I'm Kathy McGuire, and you already met, I guess, my son Ian, who's graduating from high school this year. Woo. Been a long journey there. And I really felt like I couldn't come up here and talk about, being a mother and Mother's Day without acknowledging some of the mothers that I've had, including my own mother, Carol Truitt. And she wasn't always a perfect mother, but I'll tell you what, she had a hard road. My parents were divorced when I was 9, and she pretty much raised me till my last year of high school, and is raising me still, She's still who I go to sometimes for advice. But as a single parent, and she had a hard journey. I was a hard-headed kid, I should take my glasses off. I was not an easy kid, and I remember at one point when my son was first born, she said, "I hope he pays you back for everything you ever did to me." Maybe with interest, I don't know. But anyway, and then also, I hope we remember on Mother's Day the people who weren't our biological mothers. I had a wonderful stepmother, Lila Truitt, who, she helped put me through college. She was always, kind of an inspiration to me. She was a leader in academia at a time, when women were just starting to take on that role, right? And then also I had a really strong grandmother. She was the oldest, Flora Truitt. She was the oldest of 8 children. Her mother had to go into sanitarium. She died of tuberculosis. And so she raised all of her brothers and sisters. And in fact, when my grandfather first asked her to marry him, she said, "Well, I can't till all my brothers and sisters are out of the house." And he said, "Well, okay, I'll wait." And he did. So I think that's an amazing story. But she was always the matriarch of this huge extended family, and kind of, she was the bookkeeper for her husband's contracting business. So, she was kind of an amazing person as well. And then I've got another grandmother who just turned 103. She's my step-grandmother, but she was a Kansas farm lady. And, as early, when my kids were little, she was their great-grandmother, but she would still sit on the floor and play with them, at age, late 80s, 90s. So she's my definition of spry, and I'm hoping I can keep up with her. So I remember one time when Ian was a baby. Both my mother and my husband's mother, came down for the birth, and they actually saw him being born. And it was 17 and a half hours with no drugs. I waited too long. Anyway, but they both watched him come into the world, and after it was over, my mother said, "That's as close to natural childbirth as I ever want to be again." But, so they came and helped out those, first couple. The first week, he had some health issues the first week, because he was born a little early. And, but I remember I was sitting on the couch, trying to breastfeed him. I'm probably embarrassing him mightily now. But, so I'm trying to, get him fed.
Natural.
Pardon me?
Breastfeeding's natural, it's fine.
Okay, thank you for that. And then the dog is on one side of me, just like, practically trying to crawl into my skin. And the cat's one of our cats is on the other side of me. And I'm sitting here going, and I look around, I'm like, what is going on? And my mother just laughed. She said, you're the mama now. Everybody wants a piece of you. So I can kind of see, it would have been nice to be like Holly and have those 4 arms or whatever, one for going there, and one for... But, when Ian was about, I want to say maybe 15 months old, he wasn't speaking, really. He only had a couple words. And there were also some interesting things about him, like he wouldn't touch, he had these really weird sensory issues. He wouldn't touch the grass. And so I started to feel like something was not quite right. And we had a long journey to figure that out. And part of it was because, the medical ideas about what autism was like had not caught up with what the school district hadn't really caught up with medical ideas about what autism looked like. And so part of my journey as a parent, was that, I want to say butt kicking. I want to say something else, but I'm trying to, that warrior mama, because I really had to fight the school district. And I can't tell you how many times I heard, he can't be autistic, he's too smart. Which to me just demonstrates the kind of prejudice against, disabilities that exists in our society. And, so I really had to fight for a lot of the resources that he needed, and fight that stigma, for him. And I guess, it never occurred to me to not, tell people, and, that here's what's going on. And part of it was because I knew I was going to need some help. And I want to say this too, there was that shame as a mother. I need you to understand that my child is not misbehaving, that he has a challenge. And, I want you to know what's happening. So that was hard. But then the other thing that I think has been hard, especially as he's grown up into the wonderful young man, I'm so proud of him. I just can't tell you how proud I am of him. He's so smart, and he's so interesting, and he's so thoughtful, and his opinions, I love the way he cares about the world that we live in. And, I hope I gave him some of that. I think some of it is pure Ian, because he was his own person from the minute he was born. And I know some of it's his dad, too. He's a very deep, kind, thoughtful person. But that balance between, because I was a mom and also a special ed mom, that balance between getting him, the support that he needed, but also giving him the independence that he needed to grow. And that's really coming into, being highlighted now as he's becoming a young adult. Where I have to say, do you want me to do this, or do you want to take care of this? Giving him those choices. And then I guess the other thing I really wanted to say, and I don't want to take too long, but I feel like I wanted to acknowledge that the first choice I made as a mother was at age 19, when I decided not to become a mother. And and I'm not ashamed of that, of having had an abortion when I was 19 years old. It was the right choice. I had no education. I didn't even have a job. My partner at the time had serious mental health challenges and addiction problems. It was not a good situation, to bring a child into. It was really painful for me, and I still think about it sometimes. But it was the right decision, and when I think now about how hard it is to be a mother, even when Ian was deeply wanted, he was a planned child, planned pregnancy, He had all kinds of support and love from, you know, parents who were, I think we had how many? 3 college degrees between us. You know, extended family who were thrilled. You know, I said my mother and my mother-in-law were both there when he was born. And it was still so hard. I mean, you know, any mother here knows that there were times when you just lay down and wept because it was so hard. It's like having your heart walking around outside your body, you know. So to me, for anybody to have to take that on who doesn't really want to, you know, that's just unbelievable that anybody would support that point of view. So that's what I guess I have to say about motherhood. It's you know, what is it they say? It's the hardest job you'll ever love. And I'm not going to lie and say I've loved every minute of it. But I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for this journey. Thank you.